A small-town barista gave a soaked, silent girl a burrito, no questions asked. Hours later, black SUVs surrounded his cafe. What he learned next turned his entire world upside down. Nick Barlow wasn't the kind of guy anyone would call a hero. He wasn't saving lives or climbing ladders into burning buildings. At 27, he ran a rundown cafe in South End Boston called The Morning Grind, a tiny corner joint wedged between a dry cleaner that always smelled like mildew and a lawyer's office that hadn't won a case since the Reagan era. Most days, Nick made cappuccinos, flipped croissants onto napkins with a smirk, and kept his regulars coming back with just enough sarcasm to feel like family. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Realer than anything else he had left. His father had skipped town before Nick was old enough to ride a bike. His mother, she didn't make it. A quiet tragedy that ended with a coroner's phone call and a shoebox of leftover bills. Nick never talked about it, never needed to. His life had been a slow-motion car wreck for years, and somehow he'd survived the crash by hiding in espresso shots and stale playlists. But if there was one thing Nick believed in, one thing his worn-down heart still clung to, it was this: kindness doesn't cost a damn thing. But sometimes it can buy a moment of grace. That morning started like any other, rain tapping the window, espresso hissing behind the counter, and the usual lineup of grumpy commuters mumbling their orders without looking up. Nick was halfway through prepping a regular's latte when the bell over the door gave its rusty little jingle. And then he saw her. She looked like a shadow with sneakers, soaked to the bone, her hoodie hanging off her like it had lost the will to keep her warm. 16. Maybe 17 at most. Her hands shook as she stepped inside, leaving a trail of water and something heavier, something unspoken. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her mouth tried to form words, but what came out instead was a ragged sob that cut through the steam and chatter like a knife. Nick didn't ask. He didn't need to. He came out from behind the counter, grabbed the extra apron off the hook, and wrapped it gently around her like a blanket. Then he motioned toward the back booth by the heater, quiet, away from the crowd, somewhere she could breathe. "Jamie," he called to his wide-eyed trainee, "get her a burrito and hot cocoa. Load it with marshmallows, all the way up." She didn't speak, just sat, shaking, eyes locked on the table like it might disappear. When the food came, she ate like she hadn't seen a plate in days. No hesitation, no manners, just raw, desperate hunger. Nick stood nearby, arms folded, keeping the space quiet, guarded. And just as fast as she came in, she was gone. No thanks, no goodbye. Just slipped out into the rain, vanishing into the gray like a ghost in jeans and heartbreak. All that remained was a cocoa-stained napkin and a torn piece of notebook paper folded once. Nick spotted it as he wiped the table. He picked it up, hands still damp from the mug. 5 words, handwritten. No flourish, no name. Just a single shaky line. "You saved my life. E." By noon, the morning grind was buzzing. The line snaked past the pastry case. The espresso machine was whining like a toddler in trouble, and Nick was doing what he did best, spinning orders, cracking jokes, and making caffeine look like an art form. Then it happened. It started with a shadow, big, sharp, moving slow. Nick glanced up and caught the reflection in the front window. 3 black SUVs pulling up curbside like a synchronized threat, the kind of cars that made politicians sweat and neighbors start peeking through their blinds. No one in South End parked like that unless they meant business. And these guys, they meant business. Doors popped open. Men in suits stepped out. Dark suits, dark glasses, expressions like marble. One of them walked in, shoulders squared, eyes cold. Earpiece tucked in tight, holster clipped to his hip like it had been there since birth. He moved through the cafe like he owned oxygen. Then he stopped in front of Nick and pulled out a badge. "Shut the cafe down immediately," the man said. "This isn't a request." The room froze. A half-dozen regulars stared with foam-tipped drinks, paused mid-sip. Jamie, the trainee, looked like he was about to faint into the biscotti jar. Nick blinked. "Excuse me." "Clear the building. Now." Within 2 minutes, every customer was ushered out like it was a fire drill from hell. Chairs scraped, coffee spilled, someone dropped a muffin tray. One lady complained, until she saw the Glock under the agent's coat. Nick stood behind the counter, gripping a dish towel like it might help him make sense of this. "Can someone please tell me what's going on?" Another agent stepped forward. Same suit, same chill. "There's a potential security threat involving a high-level individual. We're locking down this perimeter. That includes you." "Security threat?" Nick scoffed. "This is a coffee shop, not a—" Before he could finish, 3 more agents moved inside, tactical, calculated. One rolled out a metal case and started scanning the cafe with a handheld detector. Another pulled up security footage. Nick could see his morning shift playing out on a laptop screen, specifically the moment that soaked teenage girl devoured a breakfast burrito like it was her first real meal in days. And that's when one of the agents looked up, his voice cut like a blade. "Who was the girl?" Nick blinked. "I don't know her name. She came in crying. I gave her something to eat, that's all." Silence. The agent's eyes didn't flinch. He turned to the others, gave a single nod. "She's Eliza Grayson," the man said flatly, "daughter of the president." Everything stopped. Nick's mouth opened, but no words came out. The girl, the hoodie, the trembling hands, the one who left a note saying he saved her life. She wasn't just somebody's kid, she was America's kid. Nick froze. "What do you mean? She looked like someone running for her life," the agent snapped. "Her kidnappers crashed last night. She escaped, disappeared. By dawn, she was missing." Nick's stomach turned. The clothes, the eyes, the silence. It all made sense now. "She came here," he whispered. Another agent stepped up, holding a clear sleeve. "She left a note, with your name on it." Inside was the torn paper, the same words now tagged as evidence. "You saved my life." Nick's hands curled into fists. "She's missing again?" "No," the agent replied. "She came back this morning, walked towards your cafe, saw us, and ran. Likely PTSD. She didn't feel safe." Before Nick could respond, a radio flared to life. "Target located, injured but alive, requesting to speak with Nick Barlow, only him." And just like that, the world stopped spinning. She didn't just run, she ran back to him. The hospital sat on the edge of the city like a tired sentinel, quiet, gray, watching. Nick stepped through the sterile hallway, still trying to convince himself this was real. The girl who disappeared into the rain, the one who left nothing but a burrito wrapper and 5 words, was waiting for him. And then he saw her. She was in a private room, tucked under crisp white sheets, a thin IV in her arm, and a bandage on her cheek. But it wasn't the injury that caught him. It was her expression. She wasn't afraid anymore. Her eyes weren't darting or guarded. They were calm, clear, almost glowing. "Eliza," he said, almost breathless. "I knew they wouldn't hurt you," she whispered with a faint smile. Nick stepped closer, hands in his jacket pockets, heart still doing somersaults. "Why me?" he asked. "Why come to my cafe?" She didn't blink, didn't flinch. "Because you were the first person in 3 years who looked at me like I was human. Not a headline, not the president's daughter, just a person. And you didn't ask me a single thing. You just gave me warmth." Her hand reached for the nightstand. She pulled out a fresh piece of paper, folded in half, and handed it to him. He opened it. "You didn't just save my life. You reminded me why it's worth living." Nick stood there, silent. There were no clever lines, no coffee shop sarcasm, just gravity and the overwhelming weight of meaning in 11 simple words. A week later, the morning grind reopened. Same countertop, same burritos, same espresso machines screaming for attention. But something was different. On the front door, in clear handwriting, was a new sign: "Official coffee shop of the first daughter of the United States." And her hero. No logo, no press release. Just truth. The Secret Service still lingered. Only now, they stood in line. They asked for cocoa with marshmallows. Like Mr. Barlow makes it, no sugar packets, no substitutions. And when customers walked in, they didn't just order coffee. They found something else, something rare. A place where you didn't need to explain your pain to be believed, even if all you did was sit down and cry.